G'day everyone, it's Peter here again from 8821 Productions. I'm joined by my associate and very good friend Damien over here, who as you know is Six Place Pictures and 8821 as well. We've just finished promoting and shooting and getting through the post-production for our film Mercy of Others, which is coming out shortly. We can't wait for you all to see it. But today we're joined by some very special guests that I'd like to introduce now. We've got Janet over here and we've got Katie from BullyZero. Now, we're very happy to be teaming up with Janet, Katie and BullyZero, especially given the themes that Mercy of Others explores and the ideas of bullying behind it. I myself have been through a lot of bullying back when I was in high school. Damien has a lot of experience with it too from his period coming through as a student. And today we'd like to explore a little bit of that, the ideas of how Mercy of Others comes together with this, and learn a bit more about how we can combat bullying today in a way that hopefully doesn't match the things that take part in the film. So, g'day Janet.
G'day and welcome.
Thank you very much. And hello, Katie. Welcome.
Hello.
How about yourself, Damien? Would you like to kick off just by telling us a little bit about Mercy of Others and the ideas of bullying in that?
Yeah, so obviously Mercy of Others, for those that have kind of looked at anything or the promotion of it, obviously it does tackle bullying and that's kind of one of the central subject matters. It's kind of told through the story or told through the experiences of one of the main characters called Sean, who obviously copped a lot of that kind of bullying and everything like that. So what we wanted to do was just kind of explore the different kind of things that sort of happen throughout the process of, obviously this one's a kid that kind of came through the high school process. We really try to identify the different ways and methods that goes about it, and not just that, but the pressures that, you know, as a 16, 15, 16, 17-year-old, you sort of go through and things that we might not know of, you know what I mean? So with Sean, we kind of explore a little bit about his home life, his family life, and of course his kind of school life, and sort of the consequences and repercussions of what can sort of happen as time goes on. Mercy obviously kind of then follows suit into the more of the retribution side, which is not what we want to endorse, obviously. We want to say, you know, do as we say, not what we do sort of thing. But that's kind of what kind of spawned the project of Mercy of Others. It was to really kind of shine a light. And one of the main kind of things I really wanted to get across was, if you're sitting in a cinema, sitting watching at home, whether or not you identified with Sean, who's kind of the main kind of POV we sort of look through the lens through, or if you identify as one of the kids that we kind of identify and really go through each sort of step of what these kids sort of did to him and kind of what part they played in the bullying process. And if you can sit at home and sort of watch that and go, oh, crap, I did that, or oh, crap, that was something I used to do, or whether it, again, you identify as Sean and know you're not alone in this world. You know, people have problems and we sort of want to make sure that we're shining a light.
Fantastic. And on Damien's theme of, you know, do as we say, not as we do, let's talk a bit, Janet, about BullyZero and some of the fundamental things that BullyZero do to help in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's great about this production is that it's a conversation starter, number one. And for us, you know, the work that we do across the country is predominantly about education and prevention, talking to kids across the country, talking to communities, talking to schools, talking to parents, talking to employees.
So you actually go out to schools and...
We do.
Nice.
We do. So the main part of our work is about deploying facilitators to go out to schools and run several of our different projects to talk to them about their experience online, whether it's, you know, online face-to-face bullying, cyberbullying, you name it. Our facilitators are there to construct that discussion with young people.
Katie, I believe you're one of these experts that occasionally has to get up in front of a crowd.
Yes, we do visit lots of schools Australia-wide. So we raise the topic of what bullying is, the definition, different types of bullying, why do bullies bully, which I think is clearly depicted in your movie. Yeah, what's behind that negative behaviour? So, yeah, we raise awareness, get kids to think about their behaviours, not just their behaviours, but also the behaviours of their friends.
Has bullying evolved over the years? Because I was in high school probably about 10, 15 years ago at this point, and I remember the kind of things that I felt happening to me. And I imagine these days, especially in the digital age, because laptops only came into schools 2 years after I left, and I was the nerd that was fighting for them back then and, you know, still having to write on pen and paper. So there's a lot more of a digital age these days, and I imagine, has bullying evolved too much, or is it still the fundamental kind of things of, you know, this is how you abuse or tease someone?
Yeah, well, when you look back years, 20 years ago, or even more, if with schoolyard bullying, if it started at school, it ended at 3 o'clock, thereabouts, straight after the bell. But unfortunately, it can follow you home now. It can be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It could start at school and, yeah.
Yeah, you finally finish at school, you go home and then bing, 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 and that just keeps harassing you. Wow. So what do we usually tell people in order to try and get around, or do we say ignore that, or do we try and find more proactive ways to deal with those things?
It's really difficult to ignore. That's very difficult.
Fair point.
It's about managing. It's about managing not only, it's mainly your own online activity as well. So we often kind of look at and question, is the devices controlling us, or are we controlling the devices? So I think it's about management. Unfortunately, when you look at cyberbullying, it's actually increased, particularly in the last, say, 3 to 4 years.
Would you say it's gotten easier, especially with modern technology and the ease of social media these days?
Absolutely, and I guess the dangers around that is when we talk about cyberbullying, it can be anonymous. And we've often seen a lot of fake accounts being created.
Well, we explore that in Mercy of Others as well with one of our characters. Actually, Damien, do you want to talk about the ideas you came up with for the cyberbullying phase?
Well, like you sort of mentioned, it was more about a progression. So obviously when I was at school, not to want to reveal my age, but when I was at school, obviously we weren't having mobile phones, social media wasn't a thing. I think towards the end of school, that's when maybe MySpace sort of came in. So it wasn't really a big thing. Like you said, you hit the nail on the head at 3 o'clock, you'd knock off and that's it. You don't have to think about it again until 8 o'clock the next morning. But as I kind of went through, I kind of noticed a lot more of it when I was doing some work with the Talent Academy and working with young performers around the age of between 13 and 17. And yeah, you're sitting there with them as they're going through their phones and they're showing each other these posts and these kind of really almost a campaign, you know what I mean? Like, and again, it's like when you talk about social media, you're talking about your bullying now has a reach, and there's a line that we kind of put in the film where it's like, one of the the instigator kind of says, yeah, you had to go viral, because it's sort of saying that if you're in a group of people and there's 5 or 6 of you making fun of a kid, that's 5 or 6 that are making fun. Now you put it on social media, now that reaches 400,
Absolutely.
500, thousands even, depending on the reach of that school and how popular the kid is and how many followers they have if they're bullying that kid. So that's what I really wanted to kind of explore in there, because I thought, oh, that's a different game. That's something completely different, and that's something that you said, you go home and you can't escape it. Your phone's constantly buzzing. And we wanted to sort of explore that with our character Sean in one of the segments in the film, where it's sort of like you just can't escape it, and he does go on a bit of a social media tirade, almost saying that it's all just fake currency too, because it's not real.
Yeah.
Our social media is not genuine, so you can use it in a real negative way to target someone, alienate someone, but at the end of the day, it's still fake. It's not coming from a genuine place. So yeah,
nice. I guess the question for you, Janet, would be, with cyberbullying these days, I imagine old-fashioned bullying of just like directly in person and harassment may not get as much attention in the media. Is it still as prevalent?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And both, interestingly enough, that question can be answered 2 ways.
Please answer both of them.
Cyberbullying can actually have the physical manifestation. So what we are seeing is that
That's not just attacking someone with the phone.
No, but physical bullying, what we are seeing now is that there are cases of physical bullying that are being recorded on a device and then being used to stream across social media to gain traction. So it's almost like a double-edged sword for the young person that's receiving the physical part of it.
And then they get to relive it when they go home.
And then they get to relive it, and it's shared, and it's it becomes ingrained in that poor person's life forever, and can have some very serious consequences for the young person, but also for the perpetrator.
Oh, true that. Wow. So what are some of the steps you say, or you coach people in schools to start with in order to identify and manage these risks and bullying instances?
I think it starts with education, and Katie, you can back me up here. I mean, we understand that the digital platforms we use and the tools that we use are so important to the way we learn today. They're there to help us in our learning. They're there to give us that creative output. I think our focus is on really making sure that people who are using these devices understand that that's their purpose.
Well, they are ultimately a positive impact. I mean, Steve Jobs was quoted as saying the computer is a bicycle for the mind, in the same way that, the fastest being on the planet is a human, which is faster than a Jaguar once you're on a bicycle, which is insane compared to normal walking and running speed. So computers do a very similar thing in the way they up our ability to be proactive and probably slightly aggressive.
And also to communicate with people that we might not necessarily be able to communicate with on a day-to-day basis.
All around the world, you're right.
Fabulous tool for that. But when it starts to cross the line is when we start to see those negative behaviours come into play that start affecting the person who's on the receiving end. And when it becomes constant, the risks that we see. And the worst case scenario is that we see rates of suicide increase as a result.
Yeah, true that. I know I've lost a couple of my friends to something similar and it's always particularly difficult because after the fact, you think, if only they'd spoken to me, and you never realize what they're going through at the time. And I imagine you'll probably be a bit more experienced in this matter of knowing they don't know how to approach their situation and they finally decide to take an unfortunate outcome. What do we do to bring that back?
And that's a great question. And sometimes, I like to flip the dial on that. When a young person who has a device, may be experiencing bullying or some challenges online, the last person they're going to go to is an adult. Because what's going to happen? If you're a young person and you're being bullied and you're a parent, what are you going to do? You're going to take that device away from that young person. So in many ways, we're kind of leaving that young person to navigate this world without parent education or a strong bond between parent and young person to be able to have that dialogue. The risks go up.
Well, that's actually interesting that you mentioned that part about children not wanting to go to an adult, because I remember there was an instance where I was being rather picked on the bus every morning by a friend who was on the outskirts of our friend group, and I actually went to the teachers about it and they dealt with it, and the result of dealing with it is none of my other friends wanted to talk to me anymore because I dobbed in a mate, and I actually lost about 3 or 4 friends out of trying to dob in someone who was picking on me. So I do remember that as a particularly awkward situation where I guess you're right, the lesson for me as an adolescent in high school was don't go to an adult. Not too sure how to get around that.
It's going to make it worse, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we call that the upstander effect, and what we try to do is work with.
It has to be. Education is the key, really, and I think when we go to schools, it's allowing for that communication to happen, and also letting kids know that it's okay to seek help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not dibby-dobbing. I think our main focus is that it is all about your safety and the safety of those around you. So, and again, it's education. That's the angle we take.
Anything you've been exploring with Mercy or your other projects to do with that?
Well, sort of for me, the whole thing comes down to sort of consequence. I kind of feel like, especially for the younger generation, because the amount of times I've been thinking, like, I'll be doing something, I'll think, oh man, I should have taken more advantage when I was 15, 16, because there's no consequence. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you shoplift. There's not real, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of things that are just not real consequence. And I think, like, you look at, and even talking to these kids.
Damien wishes he did shoplifting. You heard it here.
No, I'll still do it.
Especially with the cost.
I'm a filmmaker. I can't afford to buy things. No, but it's sort of like you look at the bullying side, and if a kid is getting bullied and he does talk to his mum and the mum goes to the school, and sometimes a lot of time until we see it, we can't do nothing about it. It's one of the things in society you deal with. Well, unless you get caught red-handed doing the crime, there's no real punishment for that. And then what happens is everybody goes, oh, you grassed. You know what I mean? You're a snitch. You do this, and it kind of continues. So one thing that kids don't realise, and this is the funny thing about high school, everyone wants to be part of the group. Everyone wants to be part of the pack. And then they come out of high school and they realise, no, I want to be unique. I want to be me. And it's only if you can find a way for them to figure that out a lot earlier. Because what we kind of explore in Mercy is that kind of group pack mentality. It's like, do they all feel this way against this kid? Not really. Just one of them do. And that's the leader. So we've got to do this to impress the leader. Or we've got to, no one stands on their 2 feet and says, no, actually, I'm going to go against the grain. Because like Pete said, if you're in a situation where it's like, well, that mate's doing something to a friend, an acquaintance, we'll call him, he's on the outskirts of doing that. I just lost my friend group by trying to sort it out the right way or the correct way. So it's just trying to find balance. But it's if kids can find early about consequence, you know what I mean? The first time I drank, which was very much underage, don't do it. But you start, I remember I think it was my mum kind of had a bit of a laugh because the next morning I drank way too much and I'm at the toilet vomiting, right? And she's more like, that's your punishment. So I realised the consequence straight away. So the next time, a week later, I smelled beer and I'm like, nah, I'm not touching that because I associated beer with getting sick. So it's a way of trying to figure out a way to showcase consequences. A lot about what I go to in Mercy of Others. It's showing the consequences of those actions and whether those actions happened 3 minutes ago, 3 years ago, whatever it is, they will follow you forever and ever and ever. And I think a lot of like you said, it can stick with perpetrators because they might do something at the age of 16 or 17 that lives with them to the age of 24, 25, 20, or longer really. Sometimes they're lifelong. So it's something that kids don't think about because we had that kind of invincible mentality of, we don't really get in trouble. There's no real consequence because when you're at school, it's not like you're going to go to prison for something, you know what I mean? So it's just trying to figure out a way to, have that conversation, having them realise very quick to stand on their 2 feet and speak up. And there's not the end of the world if you just lose a couple of friends in high school. Who cares? If they're not the right friends, you don't want to be around them anyway.
Fair point. Yeah. And Damien actually brings up a good thing there about, becoming the perpetrator. Is there anything that you particularly coach or talk to schools about where you say to people, how do you identify when you're becoming the perpetrator? Because especially Australian culture, very similar to British, we have, piss taking, having a dig at other people is, in a friendly way is part of our culture. I'm going to dare to say it. How do you, I guess, vet yourself to realise, okay, maybe I'm going a bit too far here?
Well, that's interesting because in that movie I kind of identified with the Joker.
Yeah.
So, and I was at school and I used to joke around and pushing the boundaries, and one day I did go a little bit too far. But what was interesting was the group of friends that I was hanging out with actually stood up and said, hey, stop it. You're going to lose our friendship if you continue. And that for me was a real wake-up call. Yeah. And that's what the power of friends is so important, and if you see negative behaviour, this is what we talk to kids about, if you've noticed your friend is behaving in a negative way, be a good friend, call it out. Yeah. Sit them down, ask them, what's going on? What can I do to help you? Conversation, communication.
That's actually the best point. It's like getting called out by a friend is a completely like you can get called out by your parents. You're going to go against it. Get called out by a teacher, you're like, bring it on. You know what I mean? Because you feel that rebellious streak in you. If you have a friend, a close friend, call you out, you all of a sudden everything just drops. Absolutely. And you just feel like a shell of yourself.
And for me, that's that. It's just ingrained in my head, and this is something that I share with students as well. It was just, it floored me when they did that.
Yeah.
And I think the more work that we're doing around this space, it is opening up that dialogue with young people to actually call it out and say, hey, come on, that's kind of not on.
So it sounds like we found a positive use for peer pressure.
Well, yes. Yeah. And I think too what the movie highlighted for me was that the consequences can be so varied and lifelong. If you look at the characters in the movie, they're all experiencing different consequences as a result of their behaviour, and that can be lifelong, and it can affect really the trajectory of their life, in terms of their career aspirations or their goals. Having that sit within yourself, it's very hard to navigate. So whether you're the bully or the receiver of that behaviour, it's very hard to navigate that space.
Do you have a lot of people that you speak to who are older who experience your content and then go, oh, wow, I was actually, quite a bad person, Do they ever reflect on themselves and go, oh, I was that person in high school, now you mention it? Or do people usually go, oh, yeah, that's fine. I experienced bullying, and don't really reflect on their own actions?
Yeah, both. It's interesting. We've got a wonderful group of ambassadors who support the work that we do, and the key part of our work is in exactly that storytelling. Each of them have a story to tell, whether they were a bully or whether they were on the receiving end of that behaviour. But our program does identify those things for people and go, oh, that was me. And as a result of that behaviour, I now have implemented this stuff into my life because I never, ever want to do that to somebody else or understand that that's what I've done to someone's life.
So if we go a bit further away from high school, what do we find that people who are bullies who don't realise their own behaviour, how do they begin to suffer and struggle in their life afterwards?
Great question. In so many ways, you're looking at obviously mental health deterioration. You're looking at eating disorders. You're looking at body image issues. You're looking at academic stuff kind of affecting the way that they grow and become who they want to become. And then it can often transpire into how they raise their own families. Bullying is a learned behaviour, as Katie will point out. And sadly, if we're not understanding that behaviour, we can actually carry that on. And our children can see it. Our colleagues can see it at work. So it can manifest in quite large ways.
You had any experience with that, Damien?
Which part?
The idea that anything you experience back in your early years of high school begins to manifest later, especially as a writer.
100%. Oh, yeah, 100%. But my thoughts on that too is trying to educate in a way of. I was having this conversation with someone the other day because we were talking about the film, and I said it's funny because I'm talking from the bully's point of view, and because we're looking at the Ben character, the brute, because obviously growing up as a young kid, like a young boy, a lot of it's physical. You know what I mean? It's as a young kid, you think that you're the idea of you is based on how strong you are, how strength you are. Can you punch on? Can you do all these sorts of things? And I was saying the conversation of just because you're the strongest guy in your backyard doesn't make you the strongest guy in your neighborhood. And what ends up happening is you got all these kids, and you look at notoriously the physical bullies, the boys who are kind of like really getting into it, pushing, shoving, and punching on and stuff. They get out of high school and they realize they're not as strong as they thought they were. And that because they've got that fake perception of I'm the toughest guy in my school, I'm the toughest guy, they go out into the real world and get a shot.
I was going to say that's their environment once they're out of that.
Yeah, and 100%. But it goes across the board as well, whether any kind of way you do it. When you're the most popular kid in school and you leave school and realise that your servants, the people that were just laughing at you every joke and kissing your feet, you're not getting that same reception at the job you just started. You're not getting the same reception at the uni you just went to when your friends aren't with you. Because what it does for them is it creates this real false sense of reality. And that's sometimes what it's like. I always say, if you want to be the big fish in a small pond, you're not going to survive in the ocean. And there's something about that to educate them as well, to go, you're going to be in for a rude shock once you graduate and leave these school grounds, because you're going to get hurt. If you want to push and shove outside of school, you're going to get hurt. And, and vice, whatever the alternative to that, depending on if you're a verbal bully or, putting stuff on the social media, it's going to follow you. Once you find out, and people will find out, and as soon as you get over the age of 17, 18, because there's a big gap from when you're 15, 16 and potentially 17 to 19, 20, 21, and then again like 24 onwards.
Yeah.
Your responsibilities skyrocket.
Well, your responsibilities, but the people around you start looking at you different. And if all of a sudden, if that's the kind of person you are and you go into a workplace, because let's say you graduate school and you were that kind of, the Queen Bee character, for instance, and you wear that and you go, okay, well, this is the kind of career I want to get into, and you go into that, and now you're being bullied, but it's a different form of bullying. The adult in the place is kind of throwing you under the bus and making, you're not going to survive because you've never been built for that. And I just say to these kids, the ones who are getting bullied, I said, just be resilient, because the day you step out of here, you're ready for the world in a way that they'll never be.
Correct.
And and that's the other thing you got to push on them as well. It's to say your disadvantage now turns into a massive advantage later if you just hang in there.
Yeah, and that's such a valid point. One of our programs is exactly about that. It's about transitioning young people from school into the workplace. And it talks about exactly those points. It's so critical in our learning. I think it somewhere says that we're still learning until the age of 20.
No,
still growing.
brains are developing up until the average
that's
age
correct.
of
Yes, the last part of puberty that finishes developing is your prefrontal cortex, which is long-term critical thinking and decision making, and it's around 21 to 23 years old, depending on the person. You are absolutely correct on that one.
Yeah.
And people tend to not realize that. It's especially concerning with people saying the voting age should be down to 16 these days. It's like, you're already not thinking at 18. Like, people are still learning.
Insurance, you have to be 25 before you kind of...
Correct.
There are no more premiums, extra premiums.
And one thing I do remember is all the adults saying, you're not as smart as you think you are now. You've got a lot to learn, and you don't realize. It's almost like you don't know what you don't know while you don't know it. And so you end up going through those teen years thinking, I'm an adult now. I know this. I've been through school. I've got plenty of experience. Looking back now, I can look back on myself from 5 years ago, and every 5 years I can think, I was an idiot back then. 5 years ago I can think, 5 years ago I was an idiot back then. And I guess it's a positive thing to, feel like I'm continuing to build up. Yeah, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And I think, as Damien said too, the safety net of your environment or of that, that community goes once you start, hitting adulthood and experiencing the workforce and, other people in the world. That's the biggest growth curve or learning curve for a lot of people. And what we are seeing with adults, especially, as we're getting older, people are calling out that behaviour, especially online as well. People are calling out that behaviour and being the first to say not on.
That is a positive turn that I wasn't actually expecting. So, now, good to see. Yay for humanity. We're making progress in that direction. Yeah. So the other thing I was going to ask about it is because, like I said, I had some experiences in school as well. Is there a difference in the way boys and girls experience things? Is there some things that happen to young women and girls that don't happen to men, and vice versa?
Good question.
Well, with the boys, there's more of the physical, but the girls, it's social, the snide remarks, the rolling of the eyes, the covert bullying under the radar. Girls are very, the gossip, the rumours, so girls are very good at that. But when generally, overall, I think it's verbal bullying, that's the most common across the board. So, but if we're going to talk about which one's more prominent with girls, it would have to be the social.
And how would you begin to deal with having social bullying in that case, especially for a girl where, if during high school, I imagine young women, they hugely value their social status and ability to, communicate well and have a supportive friend group. How would you begin to tell them, hey, you might be in a toxic group or you're receiving this. What can you do?
That's a good one. That's really...
Sorry.
I think we can look at that again in a number of ways and just pitch in whenever, Katie. I think it boils down to having the education and allowing these young people to understand where they can go to for support and help, and also giving them the ability to be resilient in situations like that. When they're coming across something like that, how they can respond, what they can do, what they cannot do is really important to help them navigate that world, because it can get ugly. And if it's not
especially with
addressed...
social media, body image is such a big deal at the moment, and for young people, both genders.
Well, now that Photoshop and AI filters...
I was going to raise that. We are seeing an increase in, AI. There was a case recently that, a young boy took 50 images of 50 girls and used AI to transform their images, and it became quite embedded in a bullying culture at this particular school, and that's awful. Imagine having to navigate that. And then on top of AI, we're now looking at cases of sextortion as well. So it's interesting how, these digital mediums are just... It's almost every day we're learning new ways of people, new ways that people are trying to hurt people.
Well, yeah, good luck 20 years ago trying to explain a deep fake to someone. And these days it's one of the most prevalent ways that you can just swap anyone's face onto whatever disgusting thing you want and post it out there and try and slander them. And as you're mentioning as well, you can now synthesize other people's voices with a sample as short as 20 to 30 seconds of them talking. So I don't stand a chance anymore after this interview.
And I think, look, it boils down, everything that we talk about in our organisation is education on all fronts, not just for young people, especially parents, especially for adults. It's got to be a top-down mentality. We've got to behave the way we want our young people to, because they are watching us. You might not think that they are, but they actually are watching everything we do. If you're asking, your young people to get off the phone when it's dinner time, then you need to replicate that behaviour. So that's really a really important part of that journey for young people, is to understand the role they play, to understand how they should be behaving online, and when there is something going on that can be damaging to someone else's life, to actually step in and do something about it.
So I actually like one of the points you mentioned earlier about resilience and developing that. Are there any particular exercises or resources that you encourage people to explore or go to just naturally build resilience? Because even if you're not being bullied, that sounds like a fantastic, I don't know if it's skill set, but trait to have.
I think it's also having some sort of routine in place. That would help a lot. Allocate time for study, especially if we're going to talk about student study, hobbies, screen time. Just manage your time wisely, and sleep is incredibly important. We find that a lot of young people will have devices in their rooms and they're up until very late scrolling.
Guilty.
Yeah. It's so easy. TikTok, I mean, gosh, before you know it, 2 hours, you've just clocked up on TikTok. So managing and being really vigilant with that, we encourage young people and adults, get devices out of your rooms. Because as soon as you hear a little ping go off, what do? If you hear it, you want to have a look and see what it is. So, it's having some sort of routine in place and sticking to it. I think that would help a lot. breathing exercises, getting outside, fresh air. These are all it's common sense, right? You know, common sense.
I practice meditation, but good luck explaining that to young people these days, that it's a really good practice to just sit there and, just explore your own mind.
Yeah, it's about how do we make it cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure if we can make it cool, we'll start to see a flurry of change behaviour. But I think Katie raises an important point. It's about routine, it's about structure, it's about embedding those real values as well. Like what do you value? What is it that you want to be when you grow up? What is it you want to do? How can we set yourself up for success?
Yes.
These are the things that some of our programs look at.
Yeah. I actually love one of the points you mentioned about getting a good night's sleep. I remember as a kid, and I imagine young people probably still have a similar culture of, bragging, I only slept 4 hours last night. Here's the thing, though. I read a couple of books on sleep, because I didn't realize that we know a lot more about sleep than we're expecting. And 8 hours of sleep is not only a good idea, but if you get it, you're basically cheating with the amount of extra brain power you have. Like you have better memory retention. In the last 2 hours is when your body starts repairing with lactic acid and getting your muscles better. If you're learning piano or an instrument or something, you can actually now see they can track the neurons in your head for your finger movements while you're playing the piano or something. And the next day, you're suddenly better at it. I really wish someone had told me back then, it's no. You don't need to study as hard if you sleep, because it's basically cheating for memory retention. That would have been a really cool thing to tell me as a kid.
I love that.
That's beautiful.
Actually,
and then the other side of that is less sleep means more aggression.
Yeah.
You're grumpy, you're less likely to want to engage with people. So that you set the day off in a bad way.
So 3 nights in a row of getting 2 hours sleep, I'm pretty sure it's the statistic, is the equivalent of being about 2 beers drunk. With the amount that you can't
and that's
function.
interesting, Katie.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to point out Alan's case.
Well, Alan,
sleep.
Please do, yeah.
Sleep deprivation, they found that it played a critical role in his death. And, he had about 3-4 nights where he did not sleep, and the police actually described him as someone being intoxicated 5 times over the limit. That's how you can imagine one night you can't sleep, but 3-4 nights straight with the added trauma of
Yeah, so that's where those micro sleeps kick in that they're starting to talk about with road safety things and everything. Yeah, no, sleep is a really interesting thing that I looked up and realized there's so much more your body does when you go to sleep, and it's not just I get 4 hours, I'm fine. It's I'll explore this for a bit because I actually like this topic. The first 4 hours of when you go to sleep are your brain taking everything you've learnt that day from short-term into long-term memory, but it can't access it yet. The second half of your evening is where your brain goes through and figures out everything that you've been ever experienced before. How is that relevant or similar to what you've experienced, so that we can make links and connections so that you can remember it, and that's dreaming. So anytime you're dreaming, it's basically everything you've experienced that day sort of mixed in with other experiences you've remembered before, so that your brain can more easily recall it. So if you're only getting 6 hours sleep, sure, you've put everything you've learnt that day into your brain, but you've only done half the job of making your brain more effectively able to recall it. Another thing I remember reading from the book is if you don't get a good night's sleep for 3 days in a row, then you may as well have forgotten anything you learned in school that day. Yeah. So if you want to remember something, you for the next 3 days, get a good night, 8 hours sleep, and once again, saves on study because suddenly it's in your brain already because you learnt it in class.
Yeah, and then flip that to the the mindset of a young person that's on the receiving end of bullying behaviour, or anyone actually. The no sleeping stuff.
And that'll lead to aggression as well.
Aggression, poor decision making. I often say this when we're out presenting. How many people can we put in the MCG? How many people fit? 100,000?
Yeah.
That's how many kids don't go to school every day in this country because they're experiencing some form of bullying behaviour. That's massive.
And especially, I remember when I used to have a few anxiety episodes that eventually my mother took me to a psychologist to figure it out, but I'd end up physically sick and going to the toilet to throw up. And there was a period there where every second week or so I'd be getting sent home. And we eventually realised it was just due to anxiety. I don't actually remember what it was anxiety about. I'm probably just one of those people that worries too much. But I noticed that I was having physical symptoms, which at the time I didn't realise, something that was in my head extend to the rest of my body, make me weak, nauseous, and throwing up.
Yeah, 100%. And I was thinking, there's another little exercise we do when we go out and speak to groups, but I was thinking in the context of Damien's movie, all of the characters in there have experienced bullying, be a bully, have been a bully, or have witnessed bullying in some form. So we often ask people to close their eyes in this exercise and put their hand up if they've experienced one of those. And kid you not, when they open up their eyes, you've got every person in the room with their hand up. So again, the movie touches on exactly that. Have been a bully, have experienced bullying, or I have been bullied. So yeah, it's that conversation starter, I think, that is so important for us, because that's where education becomes really
That
important.
sounds like a fantastic exercise for developing empathy, which is a really uncommon thing to see in people these days. Like, you get people that say, I care about other people, but genuinely being able to put yourself in the shoes of another person, or, in the mind of another person, and go, no, this is how they're thinking, they're not just a prick, they believe this, or these are their values and that they're concerned about, which are different to mine. Like, empathy is hard. I mean, you see it in the political landscape these days. Like, good luck getting anyone with different political opinions to see your side on something, regardless of whether, it's a good point or not. And yeah, are there any other exercises like that, or someone there which help develop empathy?
Storytelling is it. Yeah. Like, storytelling for us is the critical point where we see empathy come in. And again, even though the movie it's quite, your eyes are open and it's forcing you to actually look at the characters, it's very easy to form empathy for each one.
For each of them, yeah.
Especially, the last scene for me, there's a big part of me that goes, oh my goodness, what's going on for the bully? What's going on for the last person standing? It's natural to look at that and go, what is going on for that person to feel?
Yeah.
To feel that for a person.
And the
Yeah, what's the foundation of it? Yeah, because as much as it's evolved, the cause is almost the same. You know what I mean? You've just got more
100%.
tools to bully now, and more ways to do it, and larger spread with it. But the cause of why somebody does it, those insecurities, the need for attention. You know what I mean? It's something that you're either lacking at home, you're lacking because you look at the victim and the
100%.
perpetrator, like both could have similar upbringings, both have similar things. It's just how they deal with it. And like you said, one of it's sort of related, but there's a cool little thing I saw, and it was sort of like two guys who had an alcoholic father. You know what I mean? And it's like there's a picture, and one of them's a really successful businessman, and the other one's on the street with a bottle of liquor. And they said, well, how did this happen? It was just like, I looked at my father. So they both looked at their father as an alcoholic, and one went one way and one went the other way. But they used the same cause of saying, well, watching that made me go this way.
Yeah,
and I watched the same thing and I went that way.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what it is with the bullying. They could be going through abuse at home. They could be going through. So what do? They try to take that energy and, okay, well, I'm getting picked on by this guy this size, so I'm going to go pick on a guy that size. And so instead of having that cause of going, no, I know what it's like to be picked on, they go the other way. I've got to try and fight back.
So just exploring what we were talking about there with, developing, the empathy for other people and stuff. With developing your characters, I imagine there's a certain amount of, obviously putting yourself in their shoes. What kind of processes do you go through when you're trying to develop characters like this that are bullies and being bullied?
So when you're like writing in general, whether it was Mercy or any other project, every character's got to have a motivation. So as the writer, you need to be able to explore that motivation. Motivation is always, caused by, there's always a cause behind it. So because one thing you don't want to write is a two-dimensional character. I need a villain, so I'm going to put him in. I need the bully, like the Ben character who's the brute. There's more to that character. And then what happens is when you're writing it, you're kind of going through and it's going, okay, what did they do? What you sort of start, a lot of it doesn't necessarily, the script won't spell it out for you. Oh, I went through this in my life, you know what I mean? Like the Summer character, for instance, we kind of tackle her life's sort of gone off the rails, partying and drugs and things like that. So what you kind of do is when you're coming up with these characters, you kind of need to have their backstory in line. You've got to kind of what brought them to this point. Because what makes an interesting story is we've got four people sitting here and we all got here in 4 different ways. You know what I mean? What brought us 4 here for this conflict to take place? And then what was the motivator behind the conflict, and what, you know, who's responsible for causing it? And what I wanted to explore with Mercy was it was a shared cause. You know, there wasn't just a perpetrator there, or we're going to point the finger at one person. As a viewer, you kind of sit back and watch that. But the only way to do that is you've got to explore these characters and kind of work out, one, how they fit. Because when you look at the multiple different ways of how the bullying took place, especially when we flash back to it or allude to it, it's what brings these 5 together. Because there's the 5 causes. We look at the social media side. We've got the Queen Bee, the Brute, the Joker. Will these people legitimately hang out? And so I wanted to make sure we're doing it in a way that makes sense. We're not just doing it to shoehorn and force that. We want to show all 5 counts of bullying, but it doesn't make sense because there's no way she would hang out with him. You know what I mean? So you got to do it in terms of how you project that to the audience, how you cast it. Do these people look like they hang out together? So the more real you can make it. And I always say, like, my biggest view is we're always the hero in our own story, but it makes us the villain in somebody else's story. So, and that's how I write every character, is that technically every single one of them should be the hero of their own story. And that's what the beauty was when I got to write Mercy, and I'm kind of going through, especially the more impactful scenes of showing each character, because we kind of show each character and what they did and everything, and it's exploring that was sort of fun because you kind of sit on both points of view and you kind of sit there and it's just like, well, you know, one of them's a social media, you know, jockey, so he's constantly doing his thing, and that's how he gets attention, and we showcase that, and it's just like, well, when you're writing that character, and again, it comes when you work with the actors as well, you sit down with them and you say, well, why do you need that? Because even when you're sitting there mourning your friend, which brings them all together at the start of the film, you still got your phone and you're still recording it because you need that interaction from your invisible friends, even though you're sitting around with your 5 friends. So when you write a character like that, there's more deeper meaning behind everything you write, and when you bring these characters to life, because it's not a case of, we just want to show he's on his phone. But why? You're sitting with your friends. But you just don't feel the fulfillment from them because you're not getting the attention from them, that you get the likes and everything from that. So it's like, I'm going to use my friend's death as a feel sorry for me way, which sometimes you feel people do that.
Yeah, and social media is there's a bit of validation around that. You know, we've heard stories where, especially with, you know, influencers, if they don't get enough likes, they'll delete that post because it wasn't validated enough. And I guess the characters that you've brought to life, that particular one was about validation. But each of them had different values that came across so well. And I think that's an important part of the mix too. When we go out and speak to young people, it's about, well, what do you value and how do your values fit in the mix? And how do they implicate you know, each other?
One of my favourite moments on set, we were shooting a scene and they had all 6 of the the bully, whatever you want to call them, 6 without spoiling too much, characters, victims, whatever you want to call them. And we're sitting there and we're just there's just one moment I want to, as a filmmaker, you sit back and go, I just want a certain reaction, I want a certain moment. So there's a moment where it's like we're sort of revealing why they're in the situation they're in. It's pretty early on in the film. And we had a break in filming, so I sat down with all 6 and I started just asking them questions of what was your reaction to when it happened? What was your reaction? How often do you think about it? Because what I wanted from them is, one, you actually identify who's done the work, who hasn't done the work from an actor point of view. But what you're trying to say is, well, there should be 6 different answers here. You know what I mean? Like, and as the writer, I sort of know what the answers should roughly be. But as an actor, you want to make sure that they're taking on that and taking what you've given them and explore that a lot further. So it's going, when I say, what was your reaction when it happened? So it happened on the last day of school. So you didn't go to school the next day and find out. You might have found out on social media. You might have found out when the friends call, maybe the group chat. Oh, you wouldn't believe what just happened. So what was your reaction to that? How often do you think about it? Did you feel responsible? Because you start to explore each of these characters and their mindset of how much are they going to take on the accountability and the responsibility. And there is a moment in the film where they sort of, one of the characters alludes to, this is why we might be in this situation. And you sort of see all the different reactions. And one of them's just like, no, what are you talking about? Like, you know, they cannot connect the dots at all, meaning that they don't think about it. And that's, like I said, when you're coming up with these characters, and it's not just who they were. We wanted to explore who they've become. And that's the other thing as well. So that's one of the biggest themes in the film is going, we show a little bit through the journal entries and a couple of flashbacks and just the overall topic of conversation and a lot of the talking head scenes. But that's who you were. Now, some of you might still be that. Some of you progress. Like there's one character that she literally needs extreme circumstances for her to take action. And that's something that I really wanted to showcase, And then there's another one who, when I worked with Danielle, who plays Jacinta, there was this real topic of conversation between us because she was always alluded to as the queen bee. So she really wanted to showcase how the queen bee became the mother hen based off the consequences, or based off just life getting hold of you when you started off as this, and maybe you took those same traits and went, because a queen bee and a mother hen are going to have similar traits.
Yeah.
So she wanted to showcase that in a way of saying, but then when when it comes back around, and now the consequences of what the queen bee did is now coming to the mother hen, how are you responding to that and how are you tackling that? And so I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah, it's pretty much when you're creating these characters, it's about finding a unique voice. As a writer, it's about putting myself in their shoes to understand why they do what they do. Otherwise, you just get yourself a two-dimensional character and it just won't hit as hard.
Yeah, and I think, Damien, too, what's really important there is those characters that you brought to life, they're actually real people that we see every day.
Yeah.
Every single one of them could be me, could be you. Those traits are exactly what happens in a bullying situation. Exactly.
Yeah. Well done. I'd like to explore a bit what he said there about, queen bee turning into the mother hen, and the idea that, I've also heard the phrase a lot recently, with things like toxic masculinity, and I disagree with the idea that exists. I believe that, it's just masculinity which can be presented as wholesome or positive or toxic, which kind of explores what you were saying there of, there's a toxic way of presenting certain traits and there's a positive way. Do you see much of that in the line of bullying and the way you deal with it? Where, one trait, could come across both as toxic or, if used for good, be a lot more wholesome?
That's a tough one because I feel like that language stems from what we're seeing depicted on media or, again, in storytelling. So it's not necessarily what's actually going on.
Yep.
We're kind of, and if I can use the term lacking that we recently had to talk about on social media, about a new term of reference on social media and a particular behaviour, I feel like that's as a result of conversation that we're trying to kind of push people into a certain definition of. It's like Katie said earlier on. It's bullying or it's not.
Yep.
Or it's being an upstander or it's not. I mean, really the behaviour, same as lacking. Just because you're recording somebody that's being bullied in a most violent situation, it's bullying, it's assault. Why are we introducing all of these new terms for behaviour? Let's keep it simple. We're just confusing. I feel like we're confusing the community or Australians as to, do I fit that box? Well, you're a bully. Or you're not.
No, that works. So I guess one of the other questions I do have at this point is, while I'm on the idea of, something positive, do you have any positive stories where a bully and a victim have turned into good friends? Do those exist? Or is it usually
I'm sure they exist.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like it's that common.
What's interesting is that those that have those bullying traits, quite often, they're really great leadership qualities. So it's about channeling those qualities or that kind of behaviour into a more positive into a more positive angle, I guess. So using it for good rather than for bad. So instead of, targeting someone to disempower them, how about, using your leadership qualities to empower others? And it's about engaging empathy, though. So
empower and inspire.
Maybe that's another.
Well, that ties into the previous question I was having too, of how you can positively change particular traits. So I like that answer.
And maybe that's a good call out to the community. Maybe that's something we can do is actually look for those stories where the bully has become, good friends with the victim.
Well, I know I had a couple of those where whenever I had people bullying me, I eventually realised. It was kind of dumb the way I got around it. I realised I could insult myself better than they could insult me. And they realised I was a pretty funny guy. And next thing I know, we're having lunch together a couple of times. And I'm still really good friends with a couple of them to this day. I still keep in touch. But it was just one of those things of where, I remember at the time feeling this person's harassing me, is making fun of me every day. And then suddenly, we found something we could relate on. As dumb as it is, yes, it was making fun of me. But we found some common ground there. And to this day, I'm actually still friends with some of the people that I would consider have bullied me back in school.
Yeah.
So
you obviously had the resilience, like you obviously obviously had that ability to
turn it.
that, you know, and I think that's such an important part of what we want young people to experience, that you can actually turn it. And you can be a part of that turning point. It's interesting, like some of my high school friends that I still see today can easily recall their bullying experiences. And it's interesting, I look at the line, like where I am in my life, and they're like, you were always the upstander. And I'm like, wow, that's where I am now. It's interesting, whereas some of them haven't been able to move on from that experience. And it's very interesting to see how social media now has enabled these friendships to now start communicating in a different way. We're adults. Hey, I remember you bullied me when I was a kid. Wasn't on. But now they're friends.
Yeah.
So social media has
nostalgia for when I was young.
Has enabled a little bit of that repair.
Yeah. I guess some kind of enabler for time heals all wounds or something of the equivalent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find much of that as well, Damien, from your experiences where, you know, two people who don't necessarily agree or, you know, get along with each other can find mutual ground to get along?
Yeah, not so much in a bullying sense. I think a lot of it's, I mean, like what you're saying, what you sort of did was took the power away. You know what I mean? Like when they make fun of you on the days and you go, I can do this better than you, and you're a funny guy. So you sort of do that. You take the power away from them. The idea is to try to make sure they don't abuse that power. Because like you're saying, it's you know, a lot of those traits in bullying can actually be in good leadership. You know, like I said with the Jacinta character, it's like, you know, the queen bee's selfish, the mother hen's selfless. You know what I mean? It's about having that ability to turn your strengths and do it, you know, use it for good. Like you're saying with masculinity, if you do it negatively, it's toxic, and, you know, if you use it in a positive way, it's better. But like, yeah, so there is definitely a way. I think with young kids and schools, it's at the end of the day, the reason why you could be 16 and bully someone or be bullied, and then 10 years later be able to have that conversation is because life experience comes in. Yeah. You know, I think with schools, if there was a way to put kids in situations where they didn't have to work with their friends, they actually had to work with someone. You know what I mean? I know they tried to do that. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. I'm a high school dropout, so I didn't probably focus a hell of a lot on what was going on there. But if there's a way to force those experiences onto kids to make them take a little bit more responsibility, then those conversations can actually happen a lot quicker. I think the longer they stay in their safety nets of their groups and have that wolf pack mentality, then it's going to continue to happen, you know. And again, like I said, it's about building that resilience. But again, taking the power from them is one thing, you know, and I guess having life experience come in will allow those conversations in the future. But yeah, I guess you just want to express that a little bit and stop it at the source. And yeah, so I don't know how many stories there'll be of kids at 16 being able to break bread after there was a lot of, you know, and again, it depends on what the bullying was. Yeah. You know, I can only speak for boys because that's my upbringing and my experience. But, you know, if I'm getting into a physical altercation, you know, if the fight's a break even, you might shake hands and think, okay, you got that respect. But most of the time, once you kind of have that physical altercation, you see red every time you see each other, and it's like there'll be no. We just, you know,
the best thing to do is cut them off at that point.
Yeah, you will just cross paths and not talk.
Is that a positive outcome to just cut off the bully, or is it better for mediation where possible?
I think it depends on whatever works. Whatever works. It depends on the situation. You know, I think as Damien said, if you're never going to get to a point where you can break bread, then the best thing would be to move on and to focus on yourself as opposed to that negative energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I won't keep you too much longer. I have been rambling for an hour at this point, but I would like to know what cool things have BullyZero got coming up or that you're currently doing that we should know about.
Gosh, where do we begin? There's so much going on.
Please go on.
So August is, we have National Bullying Prevention Week. It's a week where we focus entirely on raising awareness and loading our community with preventative and education measures around all topics of bullying. So that's a big week. It's a day where we encourage young people on Wednesday to dress up as their favourite superhero. So we have a cool character, Hero. He's a Japanese anime character, and his name is spelled with a Hiro. Do you remember off the top of your head?
Integrity, respect, and optimism.
So they're 4 values that we focus on with young people in the community that week. We house business breakfasts with people who have experienced some form of bullying, and will get up and talk about their own experience and how they became resilient in the face of that adversity. So it's often often a really nice event.
That's probably fantastic for everyone else to watch and learn how can I take those qualities on myself.
Yeah, especially for adults too, because we do see workplace bullying is also right up there in terms of behaviour, and we do deliver programs to support workplaces with that.
Yes.
So there's a lot of attention that week to talk about both. What else do we have? My goodness, I guess the biggest thing for us is just that delivery of our programs. The more schools that we can get to, so everything that we do is about driving our ability to deliver those programs to as many schools as we can.
Good.
Because for us, that's the biggest thing that we can do, the biggest impact we can have.
Yeah.
And through projects like what you've created, Damien, we surround ourselves with people who are working in this space because you arm us and you actually give us the ability to talk about this topic. And the awareness is just so much more, it's a bigger broadcast for us.
Just want to say on that particular regard, thank you to yourselves and BullyZero, because we approached a lot of charities and said, oh, no, we want nothing to do with it. It's too violent. It's like, yeah, but we're trying to avoid the violence. Please help us get that message. So thank you very much for understanding where we're coming from.
No, I did watch it, and it was the first time I usually tend to not watch movies like that, but I remember
quite gripping,
we spoke about it and we went,
I said, I could identify with every character, or I know of someone, and it just brought to light a topic that, it's often, taboo. Bullying, it's taboo, we don't want to really hear about it or know about it, but it's essential. It's there. It's in schools. It's in workplaces. So, raising the awareness around that's really important.
And striking up the conversation, because what we don't want is for people to get to the point where retaliation is the solution. So I think for those organisations,
looks good on camera, not in real life,
who avoid, it can happen in real life, in terms of let's think about what I'm about to do. I think it's so important for organisations like ourselves to not run away from the ugly part of what is actually happening, but to confront it and to talk about it and to...
It's there, it exists.
It exists. And when there's a creative perspective like you've done, it's actually not far from the truth in terms of the messages behind it. So let's bloody talk about it and let's change the way we behave so that no one has to experience the lifelong effects of that behaviour. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And what are you looking forward to doing with BullyZero coming up? What are your adventures?
Oh, look, as Janet had mentioned before, just getting out to as many schools as possible, community groups and also sporting clubs. We don't exclude anyone, just getting the message out there and
sporting
educating.
Clubs?
Yeah. Do you want to go there or not? No.
Well, I can imagine a couple of places being offended if you tell them, what, you can't sledge the other team now?
That's really difficult because, again...
It's the culture, isn't it?
It's the culture, but you've got audiences watching that, young people watching that, who then will take that. Again, they're learning a behaviour. It's like, oh, yeah, I can do that. So that's tricky and...
Yes, I do think of, keep it within, at the sports team, not the people in it.
Yeah, and another cool project we're working on now, I'm just looking at your beanie, Damien, we're just about to launch a campaign that uses a beanie from a retail perspective, but the message behind it is about using your head before your fingers.
Good.
So we're just about to launch that and have people really think about how they express themselves on social media and how they respond to things and stop being the keyboard warrior, bloody think. So we're just about to launch that. So there's exciting projects. There's always something we're working on.
That used to be me. I used to always have a comment for someone and I realised I'd spend hours because I could never write anything that wasn't multiple paragraphs long attacking someone else. These days I just find if something I don't agree, I just ignore it, keep scrolling and I'm a lot happier. I'm actually happy to go, I don't need to bother with this. Sure, I don't agree, but I don't care about this person and what they're saying. It doesn't matter that much.
And if you think about it, it's so much more easier to smile than it is to frown. And it's the same thing.
It's like 17 less muscles or something?
Something like that. It's the same thing with your fingers. and the head connection. Use your head first. It's easier.
Yep.
Very nice. Oh, thank you very much, Janet. Thank you very much, Katie. Unfortunately, I have to suffer with you all the time, Damien, but I've dealt with that again. And thank you to all of you that watched this production as well. We look forward to doing more of these. And please check out BullyZero. Check out some of the amazing things that this wonderful organisation are doing. And obviously, when it's in cinemas or streaming or wherever we manage to get it, watch Mercy of Others as well. Thank you very much, everyone.